the impact of that reporting. 10 years later, the U.S. surveillance state continues to expand, but because of the revelations enabled by Edward Snowden, they do so with far more weapons now in the hands of individuals to combat that surveillance. I hope you enjoyed this discussion as much as I enjoyed having it. Ed and Laura, thank you so much for taking the time to join us tonight. I really cannot think of any better way to commemorate the 10-year anniversary of the start of the Snowden reporting, as well as to explore its implications, than by speaking with the two of you ever since we had confirmation that this was going to be able to happen, that we were going to be able to make this work. I've been incredibly excited, really looking forward to our discussion tonight. It's really a thrill to be able to do this, the three of us, which is how the Snowden story began. So, Laura, let me begin by asking you, I think these kind of milestones, like a 10-year anniversary, are really helpful because sometimes temporal distance provides a lot of clarity that help you understand better what it is that happened in the past, but also sometimes subsequent events are actually important for reshaping and changing the way we understand things that happened in the past as well. So with now 10 years, 10 full years with the start of the Snowden reporting having elapsed, what is your view on the overall impact of the reporting that we did, on the heroism of Ed that enabled it, and the changes, if any, to the surveillance state and the ability of individuals to use the internet with privacy as a result of these revelations?
Yeah, I mean, those are a lot of things to answer. I mean, first of all, I want to sort of dedicate and honor this conversation to David Miranda, who took so many risks to help our reporting and tragically passed. So I just feel like we need to acknowledge that before we dive in. I've been thinking a lot about just what happened 10 years ago and the experience of the uncertainty, I think, for all of us going into this. I mean, I think it was really scary to go and meet Ed, and there was a lot of fear. I mean, there were a lot of news organizations that were that pulled out, that didn't go, people who didn't feel safe doing this, but I'm very proud of the work that we did, and it's great to see Ed and you today, and very just proud that we were able to do this reporting.
Same question, Ed, kind of 10 years later, how do you look back with this anniversary, and what are kind of your just primary reactions or perceptions about what we did?
I think what's interesting is the response systemically to public outrage, particularly when that public outrage begins to build momentum and becomes sustained. You see efforts to say, oh, you don't understand this, or it's not happening. And a lot of those times, those are directly false, and they're knowingly false. These are willful lies by governments or corporations, institutional powers that interact with us, in many ways influence us, and in some ways order us. To try to disperse that, and it happens over time, and that's seen as a bad thing, in terms of politically, it does halt momentum. But I also think it's frankly part of the learning process. It shows that distance that we've traveled from maybe it's possible, but it's not happening, to, these people are ridiculous for believing it, to, of course it's happening everywhere, to all people all the time. What else would anyone expect? They normalize it. When we look back at what happened after 10 years, it's remarkable that we're all still alive.
Yeah, well, I want to pick up on that because, Laura, you mentioned the very substantial risks that all of us face beginning with that. And I was thinking about this because if you look back kind of retrospectively at what we now call the Snowden story, the thing that we remember is that the reporting won Pulitzers for public service for the two newspapers with which we primarily worked, The Guardian and The Washington Post. Your film won an Oscar. Ed did not end up in prison the way we, I think, all thought was highly likely for him to do, but instead, even though he's exiled in a country he never chose to be in, can participate in these debates like the one that we're having today, the conversation we're having today. But it was very possible from the start that the outcome was going to be very, very different. Talk about the kind of tensions and risks specifically that you alluded to in that first answer that we were having to kind of navigate and get ourselves to more or less ignore in order to do the reporting.
Right. So let's set the stage a little bit. So we know that sort of right in the immediate aftermath, immediately preceding our meeting in Hong Kong, we know that the AP had been spied on by the government. We know that the journalist James Rosen from Fox News had been named as a co-conspirator in another espionage case that involved Stephen Kim, a really outrageous case. And we know that at that point the Obama administration had really weaponized the Espionage Act in the context of journalism. Right. So before before Obama, the Espionage Act had been used a handful of times. Only once in the case of journalism, which was Daniel Ellsberg. Right. So he was indicted under the Espionage Act and ultimately dropped the charges because once it was exposed to the level of government abuse and spying onto Ellsberg and his psychiatrists. So there was a lot of, nervousness. And then I think just putting it in the context of the media's timidness post 9/11, right? I mean, we have to remember also that in the aftermath of 9/11, that the major news organizations wouldn't use the word torture to describe the CIA's torture program, right? So all these things were very real. When I was in communication with Ed, before I even knew his name, what he did, I, of course, met with lawyers, and a lot of them were like, don't go. This is not a good idea. The Espionage Act has never been used against a journalist, but it will be. It could be. And you would be a great target. And they thought I'd be a great target to use it because I was an independent documentary filmmaker who'd already been placed on a watch list. Fast forward to today, they've used the Espionage Act on Julian Assange, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, in the most outrageous sort of threat to press freedom. So, all of those things were kind of, I think, in play. And I think that, and there were, Ed risked his life. I mean, the CIA, I think, and the government would have, done anything to stop this story from being revealed to the public.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I actually want to kick it back to you. I mean, I know that this is your show and you're